when we first launched Masters of the Universe Classics on MattyCollector.com in 2008, honestly, thought we'd get six figures and be done. We thought it was going to be very similar to the Toys R Us commemorative series from 1999, where just a handful of the main characters make it into the line and you call it a day. Actually thought Justice League Unlimited was going to be the backbone of Matty Collector. But it turned out the line became, bigger than any of us ever thought possible. And one of the big additions we got early on was being able to include the Princess of Power She-Ra characters. Well, actually, I don't honestly know if we were supposed to be able to add characters beyond She-Ra, but we did. Hey, don't tell anyone paying attention back in 2008. So the other big addition that we got in 2012, a few years in the line, was the Filmation show. This was the cartoon from the 1980s. There was both Masters of the Universe He-Man and Princess of Power She-Ra. Now, the idea of doing the Filmation characters was something we always wanted to do from day one, and honestly, I'm kind of glad that we got them later in the line, sort of about halfway through. Mainly because, well, the main characters sell a lot better, like light years ahead of anyone else. Better than New Adventures, better than like the 30th anniversary characters, heck, even better than the Princess of Power characters. So having Filmation rights meant that we had an opportunity to extend the line, the life of the line, by doing the main characters again. But it didn't mean just doing the main characters. It meant we could also do characters that were from the Filmation series that never made it into the vintage line. Shadow Weaver being a great example. She was a major character. Fangman was also a great addition that came out in 2013 and really helped communicate to the fan base that we were starting to incorporate these cartoon/animation-only characters into classics, but in a classics look, as opposed to the animated look, which, again, would come later. Celebrating the addition of Filmation characters, we had a six-figure subscription as an add-on for subscribers, and we looked a lot at who to add, like which Filmation characters do you go out with. The demand for these characters has been off the scale for years because they never appeared in line in the 80s. And we tried to really look at characters that sort of carried an episode or were recurring villains or major characters or major allies, if you will, not just villains. One thing I, though, really wanted to sort of steer the ship towards was the original Filmation characters that appeared on the Princess of Power show, as opposed to Masters of the Universe. I mean, nothing against the Masters of the Universe show, but sorry, I was more of a She-Ra fan. I loved the Princess of Power show. I thought it was fantastic. I also kind of have a thing for aquatic characters, especially aquatic villains. I don't know. I just think visually they're really cool, and there's not that many of them in the world, or at least in pop culture. Whenever one tends to come around, I actually have a aquatic character display that I keep in my bathroom because, it seems like a good place for an aquatic figure display. Now, the other thing about the Princess of Power show that was so fantastic was the Horde. While they were originally developed for the He-Man line, they were used as the villains in Princess of Power simply because they were available and they were coming out next. Now, all of the 1980s Horde characters came out in the He-Man line. And they were all the male characters. We only got male Horde members. But the Horde, and the line in general, does have a lot of females. And very few females were released in the vintage line. I mean, in the He-Man line. The Princess of Power was obviously all females. But it wasn't a lot of those secondary Filmation characters that we got on the show. We got Catra on the right there in the vintage line, but Shadow Weaver and Octavia, who's the subject of this video, never made it into the original Princess of Power line despite having very core appearances on the show. In fact, if you were going to boil it down to sort of three characters from Princess of Power, Scorpia, Octavia, and Catra tended to be sort of the three kind of main female villains. I mean, Shadow Weaver, but she's on a level all by herself because she's like second in charge. These three were kind of like the main female flunkies. And while I do love Scorpia, I'm a Scorpio. Actually, that's my my star sign. Like I said, I like fish monsters. What can I say? And when you're the brand manager of a line, sometimes your preference for fish monsters or mud monsters or whatever it is, purple Deadpool characters, well, you get your chance to sort of push that a little bit. We were going to get to the others. I mean, of course, we got to Scorpia. I mean, heck, we got to a ton of Filmation characters and a ton of female characters in the line. But the idea of getting Octavia in the line, she basically bumped Scorpia to another year. Honestly, my personal preference. What can I say? I like fish women. Don't tell my wife that. Now, a lot of fans wanted her tentacles to be bendy, like we did for Snout Spout's Snout, or the way Marvel Legends Scorpion figure is. Gumby, if you will. You remember Gumby? With the wires inside? The problem was that every time we tried to sort of go above and beyond with a figure and do something that might give it more articulation or recreate an action feature, it tended to blow up in our faces. Snout Spout Snout tore simply because the material had to be the same that he had as his loincloth. We wanted to go the extra mile constantly, but every time we did this, it just seemed to backfire against us. And it got to the point that we're like, okay, fine, we're done. We're not going to go the extra mile on these figures, because when we do that, our best intentions wind up working against us. We wanted Snout Spout's Snout to bend, and it broke. So when we got to Octavia, as much as we would have loved to do articulated tentacles coming out of her back, because she used them on the show like appendages, well, we went with plastic, and they plugged into her back very similar to how other action figures that have, I guess you could say, octopus tentacles. I mean, it simply just snaps right into a plug on her back. You can see here, similar to the way Dr. Octopus works in almost all of his toy versions, especially Marvel Legends. Now, the tentacles actually wound up being so heavy, we couldn't even attach them to the figure when we showed it off at, I think that's San Diego Comic-Con there. So we just had to put the tentacles next to her. There was just no way to attach them to the prototype because, as I've mentioned in many videos, the figure seen there is a statue, not an articulated figure. But when they did plug into the actual plastic figure in production, man, did she look awesome. And the fact that we were able to give her not only the Horde crossbow, but 4 swords, which she's used on the show, like I said, I really love the Horde. They're probably my favorite villain faction. And getting to build it out with more characters that were just from the animated series was absolutely a dream come true. Now, every time we added a figure, of course, there were fans being like, well, what about this one? Why not Voltac if you're going to do a Horde figure? Why Octavia? And we did get to Voltac. He's awesome, too. Hey, what can I say? Vulture versus octopus green female monster. There's a winner in my book. She's just a great figure. And the color scheme also really, really pops with the yellow and red and green. While we're not going for retail sales, trying to get a figure to jump off the shelf, you still want characters to sort of stand out in someone's collection. And the Horde, in general, tend to have very muted colors, lots of reds, lots of grays, lots of browns, lots of dark blues. So it was great to add her simply to sort of spice up the shelf. So she did have a lot going for her. And the Horseman did an amazing job on her crossbow, too. Crossbow. All the vintage Horde figures came with crossbows, and they gave original crossbows to every member, even those that never had a toy in the vintage line. Now, I mentioned about her colors popping, and it's really interesting how the green skin with yellow hair character, we had 2 in a row, Karate and Octavia. And I mean, heck, even Snakeface right before that was kind of a green character with some red, more coming out of his eyes, but still combining the green and red, orange color schemes in the head. The Horsemen, I very distinctly remember saying that they'd never done figures with this paint style or these color scheme of the orange hair and green skin. Now, granted, Karate and Snakeface had figures from the vintage line, but Octavia didn't. And boy, did those colors pop. Like I said, the Horde, lots of red, some blues, grays, whites, and outside of Leech, who's a very dark green, you don't have any bright green, let alone any yellow. Yellow is very rare. I mean, I guess there's a little on Mantenna. So she pops, and that's a big deal. We're always being drilled at toy companies to create toys that are going to pop in package. That expression comes up a ton. So Octavia made it in the line, and, hey, no matter how you played with her, she was a great addition. She built out the Horde, she built out the Princess of Power line, and for those who like sea monsters, well,